But Mr. Nicolson, I hope you will forgive me if I don't. The last thing I wanted when I was Director General and I was managing these things over a very long period of time was having my successors mark my homework.
I have to say, Lord Birt, isn't that what you're there for? But anyway, hello there, and I do hope you're all well. And Gary Lineker was a subject at last week's Digital Culture, Media and Sports Committee, where the excellent, well, always excellent, SNP MP for Ochil and South Perthshire, John Nicolson, was asking former Director General of the BBC, our Lord Birt, basically, how the BBC got into the mess that they found themselves in.
Can I start off, first of all, with Gary Lineker and the Gary Lineker issue? Now, he was told on the 10th of March that in order to get back on air, he'd have to apologise. 3 days later, the Director General, Tim Davie, apologised to Gary Lineker. That was some volte-face. He reinstated him without any concessions. Now that, by any standards, is a humiliating climb down by the Director General. In your assessment, how do you think, watching, I accept, from outside, how do you think the BBC bosses got themselves into such a mess?
Well, I hope you forgive me if I just don't comment on this for the reason I gave earlier, because I didn't actually know some of the things that you've just mentioned, but I hope you feel that I have been very candid about the issues, but I really don't want, having been in these kind of situations myself, so many things could have happened, so many conversations could have been had, and unless we know all of those things, it is impossible to form a view. I mean, Tim Davie has my complete support as the Director General who put impartiality on the agenda. We can recognise that this was a very difficult issue. I regret very much the actions that others took. I understand their sense of solidarity with a mate. But
refreshing, actually, to a bit of group solidarity.
What, sorry?
I think surely it's quite refreshing to see people standing up for their colleagues and friends. It used to be called trade unionism.
Yeah.
That look on his face as if to say, what's a trade union?
Yeah, let's say it is understandable that people do those things, but Mr. Nicolson, I hope you will forgive me if I don't. The last thing I wanted when I was Director General and I was managing these things over a very long period of time was having my successors mark my homework.
Okay,
and
but I think
I'm not going to do it.
I think you put your finger on it when you said that there was a question mark over freedom of expression and how people gauged that and how important it was. But isn't there another issue as well, which is consistency in the application of these rules? Now, Richard Sambrook, ex-head of news who's investigating this, has said that he thinks that there's a difference between people who are BBC staff and people who are freelance, and he specifically mentioned people who work out with the news. Now, I'm just having a wee glance here at Lord Sugar's tweets. Got a very nasty tweet where he's got a group of African football players and some dodgy-looking fake sunglasses and handbags. And he says, I recognise some of these guys from the beach in Marbella, multitasking, resourceful chaps. I mean, it's a revolting tweet. And then, on the day of the election, you can stop the communist Jeremy Corbyn, don't vote Labour. He's since signed a new contract with the BBC. How can it possibly be that the BBC bosses think it's okay for one of their freelance presenters of a high-profile, popular programme to recommend that people don't vote for the Labour Party and to think that's acceptable, but to get their knickers in the twist because Gary Lineker says something about immigration and how cruel the application of the immigration rules are?
Well, unlike you, Mr. Nicolson, I haven't been trawling through everybody's past tweets.
Give me a nanosecond. I just Googled Lord Sugar Twitter.
What a pathetic response. He's a bit of a wet blanket, isn't he?
However, let us agree that it's an unhappy situation.
Consistency is key, isn't it? I mean, you've got to be fair to people.
Of course. Plainly, social media, so to speak, has crept up on the BBC, and there's a bit of backfill going on here, trying to sort out what is the right approach, and not everybody is very happy with that approach, and not everybody is compliant. I think all of this points to the need to sort it out. And let's hope that the review does that. Let's bring crystal clarity to this situation. I guess from the drive of your questions that is something that the committee possibly would like to. Let's have crystal clarity. Let's have everybody in the BBC completely understand where they stand. I've already said I don't think there's any meaningful distinction between whether the status of your employment. It's to do with the nature of your employment that matters. Let's be really clear.
You were a freelance Director General at one point, weren't you?
At the very beginning I was, just very briefly, yes.
Just a bit of a stooshy, as I recall.
Well remembered. But let's agree it needs sorting out.
Okay.
I think, in other words, he just wants to bury his head in the sand. No one know what to do with it. Now, I know this was last Tuesday, but as being a bit of a one-man band, I cannot be everywhere at once. But with Parliament being in recess, I have a little bit more time in my hands, and I have a little bit more time to rummage, so to speak. But I found Lord Birt a little bit of a wet blanket for me, with his not wanting to answer questions and his not wanting somebody else to mark his homework nonsense. Is a bit pathetic, really, because isn't that what you're there to be doing? You're at a committee meeting, or am I missing something? Anyway, let me know down below. But I did find John Nicholson good value for money, as always. And there will be a part 2 of this, because he gets stuck into the corruption of the head of the BBC. Yes, our Richard Sharp, you know, the one who facilitated huge wadges of cash for our Spaffer Johnson, which is very interesting as well. So until then, I have to say, I think I'll leave the video here. Until the next time, I shall bid you farewell and take care, my friends.